My guess is that you don't have long-term freelance writing clients because you're messing up one of these 9 things that are really critical to nurturing long-term relationships, getting referrals, having your clients keep renewing your contract, and all the juicy, awesome stuff that we love as freelance writers. I'm Mandy Ellis, and I built a six-figure freelance writing business, and I also help other freelance writers build high-earning businesses they adore without the stress, overwhelm, or, of course, the ugly burnout. We're going to get into part 1 here, which is 9 through 5. There is also going to be a part 2, but we're going to get through these first 5, well, 5-ish things of the 9 things, but I really want you to focus on taking notes on the things that you're missing in your long-term client relationships, your processes, how you handle clients, and how you handle your work. So number 9 here. Number 9, we're getting right into it. You need to turn your work in on time, okay? I feel like this is an obvious one, but there's a lot of times where I end up talking to people who just like ghost their clients. They're like, "Oh, I got nervous," or like something came up and I just like disappeared. Like, no. Now, that's not a common thing that you ghost your clients, but I do have people more talk about how they need a lot of extensions or they mismanage their time or they make the deadline too short. And I also talk to other writers who end up trying to get it done in 24 hours or 48 hours or 72 hours. You can't be setting super short deadlines. You need to be setting at least 2 weeks out. Every new client who joins your schedule needs to be set at least 2 weeks out from your last deadline. So it can't be something that we're doing super fast. If you're doing super fast turnaround, that's another thing that you're probably messing up where you're attracting all of these short-term clients who just need it now or need it yesterday, or who aren't planning ahead, which means they don't have long term work because they're not actually planning for it. So you need to make sure that you turn your work in on time, but you also have the planning part in place where you have it every 2 weeks. Your next earliest deadline is 2 weeks. And the last little piece here, where obviously don't ghost your clients. If you miss an email or you need to get back to them, make sure you send them an email. But this is something where I think a lot of times too, you need to ask a lot of questions. You kind of need to know what the expectations are. You need to know what's expected or what you're going to do as early as possible because long term clients give you the right answers. They give you lots of answers to all your questions versus avoiding things or being like, why would you need to know that? Or thinking that there's something wrong with you for asking these questions. So when you have these long term clients, they pre-plan. They expect you to turn your work in on time. They expect you to not ghost them. They expect to pay on time, right? They expect to give you money up front. And they're also expecting you to ask questions so that, you guys can have kind of a collaborative process. So when you're on that initial client call, you need to make sure that you're asking a lot of questions. Now, if you're looking for like, what should I actually ask? If you go to mandyellis.com/cheat sheet, you can grab my free seasoned veteran cheat sheet that'll give you a bunch of questions to ask on your client calls to make sure that you're aligning with the right long-term clients versus one-offs or people who don't have ongoing work. So if you go to mandyellis.com/cheat sheet, you can grab it. It's totally free and it gives you exact questions that you need to ask on your calls so that you can kind of filter the right clients out. So that's really important for number 9. It's kind of a combination of things, but things that we need to do nonetheless. Number 8 here. Number 8, you need to set boundaries from the very beginning. So I know that you're super, super excited that that client responded. I know you're very excited to sign that contract and get some money. I know it is very exciting. Keep that excitement inside. Don't reflect that back in your response time or how quickly you're doing things because how you do it on the outside of the contract, like before you sign the contract, that reflects in your client's expectations going forward. So, what ends up happening is that if you respond really quickly while you're getting them on board, they expect you to do that while you're working. And they get sort of panicky and weird when you don't respond for 48 hours because you're working on the project. So if you end up working in the beginning, answering a lot of emails really fast, we don't want to set that expectation through the relationship because once you start working or you have like a lot of things that you need to get done for them, 48 hours, I think, is a good response time. Now, ideally, we'd want 24, but when you first get an inbound lead or a response to something, I like to do it at least 24 to 48 hours. That's when you respond for the first time because we need to set that expectation from the very beginning. We also don't want to look desperate and like we're like, oh my God, thank God somebody answered. Like, let me get back to them as soon as possible. We want to set expectations from the very beginning. And this is also boundaries. So setting that 24 to 48 hour response time to messages, whether those are Slack or email or LinkedIn. That's something that then they don't expect you to answer immediately. They don't panic when you don't answer immediately. They don't expect you to answer by the end of the business day. They don't expect you to answer over the weekend. So you're setting boundaries around the times that you answer messages, like during the day, 9 to 5 or 10 to 1 or whatever that is. And then you're also setting boundaries around like, hey, expect it to take me 1 to 2 days to do that. Now, this is something too that I think a lot of people miss because they think long-term clients want them to act like you would for a red flag or a red light client. I like to call them red light clients. So this is not the case. Your green light clients have boundaries of their own. If you have green light clients, those long-term juicy diamond clients, they understand why you don't answer on weekends, why it could take you a couple days to reply. So that's not a thing that they really are up in arms about. So we don't want to reflect those things that we learned from red light clients onto our green light clients. Like, oh, they want me to do it really quickly and I have to get it back to them, in 48 hours and we have to do all this stuff and forget about the contract and upfront payment. None of that. So when you have the right clients, you're on the same level of boundaries. And I know, like I said, I know how exciting it can be to get a response to your LOI or your pitch or have someone want to move forward and book a call or something. Wait at least 24 hours. Now, one of the things that you can do here that I like to do is I use a tool called Boomerang, and I'll make a video about this, but I use a tool called Boomerang for Gmail. You can also do this just by using the snooze function in Gmail. I just like that I have more options with Boomerang. So I can snooze the message or I can send it later. So let's say my client gets back to me and I can immediately respond if I want, but I schedule that message to send 24 hours later, or let's say, like the next morning. So let's say I answer it at 11 a.m. I schedule it to respond 9 a.m. the next day. That way I'm setting boundaries, but I'm also like excitedly answering, right? It's already done, but I just boomerang it for the next day. You can do scheduled send with Gmail too, but I just like boomerang because I have more options. You have the option to say like, hey, if they don't respond, put this back in my inbox. There's a lot more options for scheduled send. I just like the tool a lot better, but I want you to set those boundaries. Like a lot of times when you don't have long-term clients, it's because you're reflecting those red light attributes onto green light clients and it either repels them or you end up creating a situation where you have to respond immediately or your client sends more messages or more emails. And you're not setting boundaries around like I answer messages during these times or over this time frame and not on the weekends. Number seven here, you need to have kind of the same communication style. This is why I really, really emphasize to my runway students and my wealth lab students that you need to be on the same page on that initial client call. This is, I used to start out with like being so afraid of client calls. I used to have so much water next to me that I drank all this water because my mouth would get so dry and then I'd have to go to the bathroom afterwards because I was just like, oh my God, I just like, drank all this water because my mouth was I couldn't talk because my mouth was dry. But really, those client calls are not a job interview. It shouldn't be this panic thing where you get on there and you're like, please, for the love of God, give me some money and some work. It should be this thing where you're trying to feel out like, are we talking about the same goals? Do we talk about the content in the same way? Are they being kind? Are we being direct or are we beating around the bush and it's like we're not actually talking about certain things? Are we nailing down specific things for the project scope, or am I learning more about the company? Are they respecting my schedule? Are they respecting my time? Do they understand I have other clients? We don't want to end up being in this situation where we think that by signing the contract, they're going to change. Whatever you see on the initial emails and the initial call, that's going to continue into your contract. So you want to be on the same place communication style. You want to be direct and kind, but you also want to be clear about things. So when you ask questions, they shouldn't be like offended or weirded out. They should be like, oh, this is normal. We need to answer all these questions. It should be this thing where we have a clearly defined scope of work. We have, an idea of deadlines, which is like every 2 weeks or twice a month or something like that. Or we have talked about upfront payment. We've outlined, what our next steps are, which are proposal, contract, invoice, upfront payment, which is the invoice. And we're also not scheduling a billion meetings. So you need to make sure that your clients understand that like we're working in this specific way and they need to kind of align. So if you're the kind of person who likes to use Slack, make sure that you mention that on your initial calls. Hey, the best way to get in touch with me is, here's my Slack and you can hop on it and be part of it. My business, you know, um, just message me there. It's quicker than email. Or if you like email, do that. I would be very cautious about clients who are like, I want to call you all the time and I want to talk, text you all the time. That's like being an employee or even like beyond employee. So you want to be really careful about how much communicating you do, where you communicate, and how you communicate. So those are really important. Long-term clients usually have a specific way they do it, or they're willing to be open to yours. So those long-term clients, we want to have the same communication style, because if we want to have ongoing work, we want to make it easy to do the communicating part. So we want to be on the same page with that. We don't want it to feel like we're like rubbing like a dry sponge against a chalkboard, which is like one of my least favorite sounds in the whole world. We used to do that in fourth grade or third grade. We'd have these dry sponges. Oh, even thinking about it, like messes with my teeth, but we don't want that, right? We don't want that feeling of like itchy teeth. We want to be on the same page. And the best way to do that is to have that initial client call. Yes, sometimes it's scary, but like I said, if you grab my free seasoned veteran cheat sheet, I'll give you the questions. And also, I think if you know that you're on this call to suss them out, just as much as they're trying to get to know you. We're trying to like see if we're a good fit. It's not like, I need the work, please, for the love of God, sign something. It's getting on the same page and seeing like, is this a good fit for both of us? Number six. So, this is something that I think is really hard to learn as a writer. You need to do the best you can with the skills you have in the time frame you're allowed. So basically what that means is that we're not trying to, make everything the best every time. We're not trying to get into perfectionism. We're trying to do the best kind of work that we can for our clients within the time we're allotted, which is our deadline schedule, with the skills we have right now. So the more you kind of work with that, the better you actually become. If you're reaching for perfectionism, one of the things that I usually think about when it comes to perfectionism is that your idea of perfection is nobody else's idea of perfection. So even if you submit something and you think, man, like this is perfect. Like I did the perfect job. Your clients will not agree. Like your idea of perfection, no matter where you go, whether it's clients or fruit or flowers or whatever you're comparing with somebody else, your idea of perfection is nobody else's idea of perfection. So I want you to do the best you can. So do the best you can with what they've given you in terms of the brief. Ask questions if you need more information in terms of the scope of work. Ask questions if you need to. In terms of the time you're given, which you want at least 2 weeks on your deadline. If it's rush work, you can charge more for that. But I want at least 2 to 3 weeks on a new deadline for a new client. And you have to use the skills you have right now. Part of those skills, though, is asking your client for an example. So when we're talking to long-term clients, they should be able to give you examples of what they want. So when you're kind of working with them, you know how to deliver for them because they've given you an example. So we're using our skills, but we're also kind of able to up level because we're meeting the example that they're giving us. So we're able to write to this kind of different format or layout. So we want to follow the example that they gave us. And if they can't give you an example, go find one that you like and send it to them and say, do you like this? Because working off an example is the best way to continue to have these relationships, to excel for long-term clients and have them keep renewing your contract. You're making them happy because you're meeting these examples. You're meeting exactly their expectations. The other thing too is that when you turn something in, ask for feedback. I think part of the writing process, if you really want to become a better writer, is getting that feedback. And I would especially ask for feedback from some of those clients that you have already had for a while, or clients who you really trust their opinion. So I would definitely ask for their feedback. And then you kind of take the feedback as like, these things I want to keep, these things I don't. But you want to ask for feedback on your work, especially from those top clients. And this really helps you work not only on improving your writing skills because you're doing what you can with what you have, you're following either a brief or an example, but you're also getting better insight into what your client thinks about not only the type of work you're doing, but also the process and how you're handling it and what they think about what you created as the end result. So I really think that's important when you're keeping these relationships. You're opening the door for feedback. You're opening the door for collaboration, and that's really important. Number five in our part one. Number five in our part one. So you need to understand their needs. So this is something that I think is really important for long-term relationships and also for your LinkedIn and website is understand the needs of your clients. And this is really easy. Just get on calls with them and they will repeat themselves over and over and over again. Write that down. Write down what they say. I had a bunch of notes from all my calls and they kept repeating themselves. So I would put that in my LinkedIn, my website. And I would also use that as a way to improve my client calls with, like, I could say, oh yeah, I've talked to other clients who have mentioned XYZ are problems, and they'd be like, oh, you understand us. So you want to make sure that you understand their needs, right? You kind of listen to them and on the call, and you really kind of start integrating that into other parts of your business. But I also like to call this the tuning fork technique. So this is something I teach to my students, where we go through like the pain points and the struggles, right, connected to the skills that you bring to the table, the goals that they have, and the niches that you're in. So we connect these things together in this tuning fork technique, where someone reads your LinkedIn or website or hops on a call with you and they're like, oh, they get it. And if they think you get it, they think you automatically have the answer. So if they think that you're on the same page as them, they're like, oh, Mandy already knows. Like, she's already said all the things that we were going to say, or like she's already, listened to us and she gets it. Like, that's what we want. We want this really nice connection between what they're reading on LinkedIn and our website and the call, and really building that relationship from saying, like, I understand you, I understand your needs, I understand why you have these goals, and I also understand why your audience needs this type of content delivered at this time for this part of wherever we are in the funnel, or wherever we are in the buying journey, or whatever. So all of those things are really important to kind of combine together. So I think one of the hard things is the listening part, right? Sometimes you get on a call and you're just like so excited to talk to a client that you're just like, I don't want to listen to what you have to say. Like, let me just tell you. So really listen, like, let them talk first, ask them about their project, get them to give you as much information as you can, because that listening aspect is really important to building a relationship. They want to feel heard, they want to feel understood. I know that sounds a little bit different than probably most people teach, but really building relationships means they're heard and understood. Then you're responding. You're not reacting. You are responding to what they've said, why they've said it, how they've said it, or their goals, or the structure of the project that they've given you. And that response really leads to starting the process of building these relationships. So this is part one. We'll do a part two as well. But I hope that you're kind of understanding how these pieces go together. We're building relationships from the very beginning. We're being very specific with how we onboard people, or how we use our LinkedIn and website. We're being very specific with what we do on calls. And we're not trying to build relationships with people who are not on the same page, communication style or project style or goals. We're really listening, and then we're applying that to move forward. So I hope that this has been helpful, and I will see you in part two.